Hello everyone. It has been a while, I think a solid month since I last released a video. Today I am going to be sharing my birth story. I had planned for a natural birth and things took a turn once I went past my due date. I will explain that a little bit more obviously in this video. Before I get into the story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to follow along with my journey, motherhood, adventuring with my family. In my last two videos, one of them was a recap on my third trimester symptoms, or just my third trimester experience in general. And after I edited that video and I posted it, I realized how intense it all sounded. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize how much I went through my third trimester because it all just felt so like beautiful and rewarding. And then me watching that made me acknowledge kind of like, wow, women go through a lot when they are pregnant and when they're trying to have children. So I wanted to mention that because today's video, I feel like it's going to sound like a lot again. And because I've had now multiple weeks coming up on a month to process everything, maybe the way I say it isn't going to make it seem like I feel like it's intense. But when I was in it, it was definitely intense, and I'm still in it. I'm still recuperating and recovering. So I just wanted to like put that little disclaimer out. If it sounds intense, it's because it was, and if I'm not reacting like in a intense way, it's because I'm getting used to telling the story. And then the other video that I had put out recently, or not recently, but one of the last videos I put out was the video about going past my due date. I'm just going to recap that a little bit just so that we know what was happening leading up to all of this. So I had gone past my 40 weeks. At 40 weeks, baby was not engaged. She didn't feel like she was ready to come out. Like, I didn't feel like she was ready to come out. I kept saying, like, I don't feel like I'm just spontaneously going to go into labor anytime soon. And so I was doing some things to kind of help her come out. I didn't feel too rushed though, but I still did some things because after 41 weeks, like, we have to start thinking about going into the hospital, getting checked, and thinking about induction and all that stuff. And I just was like, I didn't want it to get to that point. So although I didn't feel rushed to get her out, I also just wanted to like help her out if I could. I was drinking the red raspberry leaf tea. I was pumping. I was walking every day. I was curb walking to try to get her in the right position to get engaged. And so yeah, that's where we were in my last video. After the last video, things started to take a turn because, like I said, I was approaching 41 weeks and labor hadn't started. Nothing was happening. I didn't feel like I was going into labor. She wasn't engaged. And so at my midwife appointments, I think I was 39 weeks and like 5 days or something, I was told that at my next appointment, I could get a membrane sweep. So then the following week, I was 40 weeks and maybe 3 or 4 days. I was offered the membrane sweep and to check also if I was dilated. I was dilated, but like not really, because she kind of had to like push to open it. Like, she kind of like forcefully opened it to like 1 centimeter. And I say forcefully very lightly. Like, she was very gentle and very consent. Like, she used a lot of consent and explained to me what she was doing and stuff. Anyways, so I was like slightly dilated, but not really. And that hurt a lot. And if you watch my other videos from when I had the threatened preterm labor, you would know that I'm very sensitive down there. So it hurt a lot and I was very uncomfortable and I bled. And so when she wanted to do the membrane sweep, she said that she would have to kind of open me to 3 centimeters. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, it's too much. Like, it's gonna hurt. And I just didn't feel comfortable. And also, I just had this feeling that like it wasn't the right thing to do at that moment. So I ended up saying no and I didn't get the membrane sweep. So after that appointment, it was recommended that I continue to pump and do my walks, but for much longer. So it was pumping for an hour and then walking. I don't remember how long it was that I was supposed to walk, but it was really long. I think it was about an hour, and then pumping an hour and then walking an hour. And it was recommended that I just keep doing that. So that was like the protocol that I was supposed to do as of that night. And then the next day do that as well. So that, I think that was the Wednesday and Thursday. And then the Friday I was going to the hospital for, they call it a TRF in French. I don't know what that stands for, TRF. But basically, like, they send you into the hospital, you get hooked up to get your contractions and the baby's heartbeat monitored, just to make sure that everything is a-okay and baby can stay in there longer. And then they also do an ultrasound to make sure there's enough amniotic fluid. That was on the Friday. And at this point, like, I didn't want to get to the hospital point because I was sure that if I got to that point, they would want to schedule me for an induction, and I really didn't want that. So on the Wednesday, I came home and I started pumping for an hour, walked an hour, pumped an hour, walked another hour. And at this point I was getting like pains, like sharp pains in my stomach and like small contractions, but nothing was really like activating, nothing was happening. I went to bed that night, I was super sore, my back was aching. I just was like not feeling it. I wasn't feeling good at all. And then on the Thursday, my plan was to do that again, like just the pumping, walking, pumping, walking, pumping, walking. But when I woke up the next morning, I was dead. My whole body was aching. I was like crying. And I called the midwife and she was like, the best thing to do right now is just relax, you know, take it easy. You still have time. Things will happen when they happen. So that's what I did, is I relaxed. I cried a lot that day. And yeah, so the day went on. The next day I was going to the hospital. After the hospital, I was going to go back to the birth center and we were going to do the full protocol to start labor. So what they suggest is pumping for an hour, going for an hour walk, and then also taking castor oil. So you take like castor oil with apricot juice and a couple of other ingredients, and that's supposed to get contractions going. And they had also told me that I could take the castor oil at home to start labor. And on that Thursday morning, I was thinking of taking it. We had went and bought it the Wednesday night, but as I was sitting there looking at that bottle that Thursday morning, I didn't feel good about it again. Like, it smells like paint. Like, it just smells super toxic. And to think of ingesting that and like forcefully giving myself contractions, it just didn't feel right. Something was telling me, don't do it, don't do it. So I ended up skipping it. And this was even after people had told me that they had taken castor oil and it started their labor and they went into labor and it worked super well for them. So even despite that, I just wasn't feeling comfortable with it and I listened to that, and thankfully I did. Thursday went by, like I said. Then Thursday night, I knew the next morning we were going into the hospital. So, and I had like this feeling that I should just be prepared just in case anything happens. And I also wanted to like know if they did schedule me for an induction, like I just wanted to be well informed of everything. So I took out Ina May's book, The Midwife's Guide to Childbirth, and I just reviewed all of the sections about induction, about C-section, about all the different drugs that can be used, which ones are not recommended, which ones are recommended, all that stuff. I just wanted to be really, really prepared. So I went to bed that night and I was hoping labor would start, and it didn't. The next morning we got up really early. We ended up packing everything. Like, we got the suitcase that was the birth center bag. We got that ready, packed the car, because even if nothing happened at the hospital, we were still going to go to the birth center and try to get labor started there right after. So we brought everything with us. Once again, thankfully we did that. And then we were off. This whole time I had a really bad feeling. We were driving to the hospital and I felt really, really sad. And I just had a feeling that like something might happen that I wasn't prepared for. So as we were driving, I actually put on this song called Hold My Girl I think it's by George Ezra. In the chorus, he just keeps saying like, give me a minute to hold my girl. And I started crying. I just had this feeling that that's what I was about to walk into, that something bad was going to happen and I would just want to hold my girl, my baby. And I was also thinking of Jeremy wanting to hold his girls, me and his baby, you know? And so I was just like tearing up, crying, listening to that song. And I just had a generally not good feeling about what was to come. So we got to the hospital. We were waiting in the waiting room to be seen for the monitoring and for the ultrasound. We went into the room, we got called in. And I sat down in this reclining chair and they put the bands on me, the same ones as the ones that I had when I had the threatened preterm labor. And I kind of go back in the reclining chair and I'm thinking at this point that anytime I go on my back, I don't feel well, and I know that the baby doesn't like it, but I also didn't like correct them because I thought they do this all the time. They know it's safe when it's not safe, so they don't need me being like, excuse me, I don't think that I should do it like this. So I just went with it, reclined a little bit, sat back, tried to relax. At this point, Jeremy had taken out the camera. He was trying to get some pictures, some videos and stuff, getting good angles, and I suddenly just had this general sense of like unease and just like not feeling well. And I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but I just wasn't feeling well. And so I kind of snapped at Jeremy and I was like, this isn't the time. And he was kind of like, what? Like, he was taken aback a bit. And then he was like, okay. And didn't understand why I snapped at him. And he started putting the camera away. Like, literally seconds after I said that, because I don't even think the camera was back in the bag yet, the machine starts going beep, 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 beep. And I knew because of the threatened preterm labor that if I move and the little monitoring things that are on my tummy move, then it loses the heart rate and then it beeps and then they can just reset it back up. But at that point, I hadn't moved at all. I was just lying straight in the recliner chair. So I knew that I hadn't moved. And something kind of went like, in my brain, kind of went like, something's wrong. You didn't move. And I told Jeremy, I was like, go get somebody now, quick. And so Jeremy went out of the little area that we were in and he went to get somebody. Kind of like nonchalant, like everything's fine, you know? He went to get somebody, they came, they checked the machine, and they tell me, roll over onto your left. So I start to roll over on my left. Keep in mind, I'm 41 weeks and 1 day at this point. So I turn onto my left side, but very slowly. And she tells me quickly. And I'm kind of like, why do I have to do it quickly? Like it wasn't registering, like things were happening quickly. So I get onto my left side, and then almost as soon as I get onto my left side, she's like, get onto your right side quickly. And I'm like, geez, woman, like chill. So I like really push myself to get onto my right side quickly. And then she's like, get on your hands and knees. So then I get on my hands and knees, and at this point I'm facing the wall, so I don't see anything behind me. So each position was maybe like 3 seconds. And then she says to sit back down. And as I turn around and sit, suddenly there's doctors everywhere and a stretcher. And they tell me that I'm going in for an emergency C-section because her heart rate is decelerating. And I start freaking out because I hadn't planned for this. Like, although I did have a feeling something like this might happen, I hadn't planned for that. I start freaking out and I start saying, no, like just give me a second. I need a minute. She's okay. She's going to be fine. It just because I was on my back. And then they say, no, like you're going in. And then the doctor tells me to open my mouth to spray medication in it. And me being a very cautious, like I would say anxious person, I was like, what is that? I was like closing my mouth. And she said it's the nitro whatever thing that stops heart attacks. So I was like, okay. I opened my mouth. She sprays that twice in my mouth, and I assume it was to stop the baby's heart from stopping. And so at that point, I kind of realized how serious it was, and then I was on the stretcher, and then they start rolling me towards the C-section room, and I tell Jeremy, call my mom and call your mom right now. And I'm like, right now, like there's no time. And as I'm saying this, I'm looking in front of me, and there's a woman, and she's pregnant, and she's about to go get monitored. And she looks absolutely terrified watching me. So I felt really bad about that. And then I called my midwife. She didn't answer. Like as I'm being rolled in the stretcher, like through the hospital to get to the C-section room. I call my midwife. She's not answering. So I called the stagiaire. And she answered the phone, thankfully. And I just said, like, I was just crying. And I was like, I'm about to have an emergency C-section. Please come. I'm really scared. And she said, we're on our way. What hospital are you at? And I told them the hospital. And then they immediately came. They left like right away. So they pulled me to the area where the C-section happens, or the C-sections happen. And right before they went in, they put the contraction belts on me. And they told me her heart rate went back up. So I was like, thank the Lord, you know, like so happy she's okay. And then the doctor comes and sees me, and she tells me we don't need to do the C-section right now this second because the heart rate went back up, but I can't let you leave the hospital because it's too risky, like you might lose her. And she tells me that the deceleration was happening for 8 minutes. If you look online for heart deceleration, it says that 3 to 5 minutes under, I think it's 100 beats per minute, can cause, or most likely will cause, I guess, but basically a lack of oxygen. So there can be brain damage and also stillbirth. And so I obviously didn't know this at this point, but looking up the stats after, I was like shook. So she was 8 minutes. I didn't know how many beats per minute at this point. I still don't know because we only get the report, I think, at the next midwife appointment. That was terrifying. So she tells me that she can't let us go. It's too risky. We're going to have to induce today and try to get her out that way. And if her heart starts to decelerate again, we'll have to have an emergency C-section, and this time we won't be able to wait. Like we have to do it right away. Prior to this, I was like freaking out. I did not feel like I could do this. I also just had a hard time like figuring out how am I going to collect myself enough to go into this room to get this surgery. When she told me there's a possibility that we could induce instead, it still wasn't obviously my first choice, but it sounded better to me than a C-section. That was like good news to me. And then my mom got there, Jeremy's mom got there, and the midwives got there. And I was able to speak with all of them. I was able to really collect myself, just like pull strength from them. And I spoke with the midwives and I was like, what's better, like an induction or a C-section? They said definitely an induction, like try to give birth vaginally. It's like a lot better for the recovery. And they said like you're getting induced, so don't worry if you have to take the epidural, like the contractions are going to be much stronger. So in general, I was feeling a little bit more equipped. So then my midwives left and they told me when I start active labor after the induction, they would come back. Literally 5 minutes after they left, I started to get that general feeling of unease again and just like I wasn't doing well. And my mom was there and Jeremy's mom, and I asked them to check what her heart rate was at because I couldn't see. And they told me, I believe they told me that it was going down again. And then they rushed to get somebody, but I don't know if it was the doctor at this point or if it was my mom who told me, but it was at 65 beats per minute, her heart. And normally it's at 150. So it was like crashing fast. And so again, all the doctors, like 5 doctors right away there, and they start rolling me out and they tell me take off all your jewelry. So like my earrings, my ring. And as I'm being rolled out, they tell me take off my underwear and my bra. I'm just like, I had a robe on, so I just had to pull those off. So I'm being rolled out, just pulling everything off. And at this point I'm like, okay, it's go time. Like I don't have a choice. I need this baby out. And she needs to come out safe and sound. So we're doing this. And I had to like just put my brave face on. Keep in mind, surgery is like very terrifying to me, and a C-section specifically, I was terrified of. So we get pulled to the surgery room. Jeremy has to go put his scrubs on. I go into the surgery room and I like immediately dissociated completely. Like I didn't know how else to handle how scared I was, and because everything was just happening so fast, like I just didn't know how else to act, I guess. So I just completely dissociated. The first thing I said when we went in the room, I was like, wow, the lights are so bright in here. And they were like, yeah, we need to see what we're doing. And then I just kept making remarks like that throughout the entire surgery. And I can't remember all the things that I was saying because I was obviously like on drugs and numb and all that stuff. But I was like, I know I remember just talking about my cats and being like, did you guys know I have 4 cats at home? And I remember asking the doctor, like, am I going to be okay? And him saying, like, this is the safest thing to do for you and your baby. Like, don't worry kind of thing. And then me just being like, okay, but am I going to be okay? And him being like, yes, you're going to be okay. And me just having no choice but to just believe that, because what else can I do? You know, like I needed some kind of hope. And I know like C-sections are common and everyone has them, and like, but to me I was like, there's a possibility that I die. There's a possibility that my daughter, I'll just say, isn't okay when she comes out. So I was terrified. I had to straddle the table thing, like this, I think it was a table. I don't know if I was on the table at that point or still on the stretcher, but I had to straddle it. And then I had to arch my back like this and put my hands in front of me. And I was shaking so much at this point out of fear that somebody had to like come beside me and push down on my shoulders and hold me there. And then they froze it with the needle, which wasn't that bad. But then the epidural, and keep in mind, it's not an epidural like when you're giving birth vaginally, because then you're getting like small increments of the epidural whenever you want them. This is just like a major dose, one shot. So the epidural, when they put it in, I felt like burning liquid first, like going down my left side of my body, like into my back, hips, legs, and then after I felt the right side. And the feeling was so uncomfortable that I literally screamed. I think that was probably like the worst part of the surgery, was the epidural part. And then they lied me down and then set me up. Jeremy came in and then they started doing the C-section. And honestly, there's no pain. Like you're not feeling like any like shooting pains, stabbing pains, or like someone's cutting you. But you feel everything. Like you feel all the pressure, all the pulling and the tugging, and it's so deep within you that it's just very uncomfortable. And at this point, I'm like holding Jeremy's hand. I was holding the doctor that does the anesthesia, I don't know what he's called, holding his hand, and I was like digging my nails into his hand because I didn't want to hurt Jeremy. And I was just saying the randomest things to try to distract myself and dissociate from what was happening to me. And then I just kept looking at Jeremy, like seeing his big blue eyes and getting really terrified that something bad would happen. Anyways, so I had like a hard time keeping eye contact sometimes because I was so scared that I would, or that he would lose me, or we would lose the baby, and I wouldn't be able to like forgive myself, I guess, at that point. So anyways, that was kind of like during the whole thing. Keep in mind, she's out within like 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes tops. So then they like go to pull her out, and that was like the worst like discomfort part, because it feels like they're pulling something out of a very small hole, because it's very small, it's like this big, and they're pulling a whole chunky baby out of there. So at that point I was like like just, I wasn't having it. And then the doctor says to me, he says, he's like, do the breaths that you've been practicing for labor. And I look at him and I'm like, I haven't been practicing. And then the only thing that I could remember that like learning from the prenatal classes and just like learning that helps was doing horse lips. So I started going like that. Obviously with my lips flapping a bit more, but doing that kind of breathing. And the doctor was like, okay, that's good. Keep breathing. And then I was doing that and I was just like, oh man, this is like so awkward and just like uncomfortable. And then the doctor tells me, okay, shush, listen. And then I like kind of stop completely. And then all of a sudden I hear her cry. And that's when I knew she was okay. And I think, so everything from here is a little bit loopy. Like I was on morphine and I was like, super, like all the way numb from like here down. So I don't remember the exact chronological order of everything, but I know that she went to the table to do the AGPAR test. She got a 9 on 10, so that was amazing. And then I know that Jeremy went to see her, and I think he went to get her. Jeremy also cut the cord, and then they put her on me, and I just remember like being so concentrated on her at that point that I couldn't feel what was happening down there, like barely feel it, as they were sewing everything back up. And then Jeremy left with her, and I met them in the next room, and then I breastfed for the first time. And then we were rolled into the room where we were staying for the next 3 days, or 2 days actually. Yeah, 2 days. And that's where I saw my mom, and that's where we saw Jeremy's mom. They actually had quite the view from where they were waiting for us. They could actually see into the surgery room, and they could see into the hallway to get to the surgery room. So that's why we actually got pictures and whatnot of everything that happened. They're such intimate, vulnerable pictures, and I feel like they really captured the moment through those. So I'm really happy that they got them. From there, obviously my recovery started. I will say that recovering from a C-section is very brutal. Getting in and out of that bed at the hospital was just terrible. I had to literally, because I would be falling because of how it's angled, so I would always slide down the chair a bit, and I'm numb most of the time, so I kept like sliding down. So sometimes I got like stuck even on the stretcher, not the stretcher, but on the bed, and I just couldn't get up. And at one point my bandage tore because I was trying to get up and I just couldn't, and it like ripped all my skin off, and I was bleeding and it was pussing. That was really, really painful. But yeah, the recovery was just hard. I couldn't get out of bed. It took me about 30-ish minutes, maybe a bit more, to just get out of bed. So what was really difficult about that was that, and also I was frozen, like, so for the first, I don't know how many hours. So what was hard about that was watching everyone else take care of her, and I couldn't even like go change her diaper or really do anything. Jeremy, because even my back was hurting from the epidural, the back pain lasted like, I think like 2 weeks. Jeremy had to like hold the baby to my breasts for me to breastfeed, and he had to do that for the first almost week of her life. So he would just be kneeling on the floor and like holding her when we got home, and at the hospital he would just sit beside the bed and like hold her to me, or sometimes I was able to hold her, but because of the positioning and I was so weak, she wasn't latching properly, and then like my nipples were destroyed. Probably TMI. Yeah, they were cracked, they were bleeding, they were sore, they hurt. And anyway, so it was just like quite the journey for the breastfeeding part. I only was able to figure it out once the midwife came to my house a week later and showed me how to properly hold her in the cross cradle position to get a better latch so that she could learn and I could learn and I could heal as well. So there was that. And then back to me getting out of bed. I literally had to like put my arms way up high, reach the top of the bed where there's like handlebars kind of, and pull myself up with only using my upper body strength and not like using my abs or my legs or anything. That was the only way I could like pull myself up, and that took a while. And then I would have to turn over slowly, like again using the handlebars, and then push myself up with this hand, and then kind of like catch myself and like push until I was sitting up straight. Then I had to put the bed all the way up so that I could stand, like be like almost standing, so it wasn't too hard on my abs. So it was just like quite the process, and like often by the time I was sitting, I would just be crying because I felt so helpless and so vulnerable, and just like I couldn't change my own diaper. Like the nurses had to pull my diaper off for me and put it back on. I just felt helpless, and I was in pain, and I couldn't hold my daughter by myself a lot of the time. I couldn't really take care of her. So there was just like a lot of emotional trauma, I guess, and on top of the physical, of course. I had to shower while I was in the hospital. I think it was like 24 hours after having done the surgery. So I had to take off my bandage and like wash it, and I had staples in. So that scared the crap out of me. When I went in the shower, I was like nauseous. I wanted to puke. Speaking of nausea, you're also nauseous after getting the surgery. So like they recommend that you don't eat at first. I was still able to eat because I'm not like a generally like pukey person, but you are nauseous and your skin is all itchy like after the anesthetic and just like the whole C-section thing. But yeah, so in the shower I was nauseous. I thought I was gonna like faint or vomit or something because I couldn't stomach the idea of like taking off my bandage and washing the incision that was just stapled, and it would just gross me out. So I needed a lot of help, and I was crying, and we were asking the nurses to help, and they weren't really helping. So that was difficult. I was also getting like meds up my butt every like 8 hours. So again, very vulnerable for me. We weren't sleeping because she was like just swaddled in a blanket, and I was scared that the blanket would like suffocate her. So I felt like I had to watch her at all times, and I just couldn't sleep. And then every time that I would try to sleep, because my mom spent the first night there just to like, so we could get like an hour of sleep or two, and Jeremy's mom spent the second night at the hospital, and just they literally just watched the baby so that we could feel safe enough to just like get an hour or two of sleep. Over the whole weekend, I think we got like 4 or 5 hours of sleep in like 72 hours. So that was brutal. But yeah, at night, the reason why I wasn't able to fall asleep even when someone was watching her was because there was like this vent in our room, and when I would close my eyes, the air coming out of it sounded like the machine that tracks her heartbeat, like the and so that sound just like put me back into that room where her heart started decelerating. And then beside me was a machine that would beep and then go like beep beep, and the beeping sound would remind me of the beeping of the machine when her heart decelerated. And then I would just start reliving like the C-section and everything, and it was just like very intense, and I would start crying. It was just like reliving it over and over and over again all night long. So that was really difficult for me. By the time that I got home, I still like couldn't get in and out of bed properly. I had to use like a pillow on the wall to kind of like slide down. I was in a lot of pain. I still couldn't get my diaper off by myself, so Jeremy had to not only change all of Rosie's diapers, but also change my diaper for me every 4 hours. Put my socks on, help me get dressed. Not that I really got dressed, I just wore a t-shirt most days. Yeah, it was just like a brutal recovery. All of this happened, like she was born less than 2 weeks before my birthday. And so by the time we got home, we were really, really close to my birthday. And I was like crying at the table one morning, just like sitting there crying. This was the only chair I could sit on for like the first almost week, because the couch is too deep and too low, and the bed is uncomfortable, and like so I would just sit on this chair, like that's all I could do. Anyways, so I was sitting on this chair at the kitchen table, and hadn't put socks on that morning because I couldn't reach my own feet, and I was crying, and I just felt so helpless, and like I just felt terrible. And I like turned over to Jeremy, and I was like, I don't want anything for my birthday. The only thing I want is slippers, like slippers that I can just slip on, because my feet are freezing, and I just want to be able to like keep my feet warm, basically. Like, that was my only wish for my birthday. And just because I was crying, like, that felt like so vulnerable to me. And I just feel like it depicts really like how low I was. The baby blues were really hard as well. Before I get into more of the emotional part of it, I'll just say that the reason why her heart was having the deceleration, and also why she wasn't getting not engaging in the pelvis to be born vaginally, was because her umbilical cord was wrapped around her shoulder and then wrapped around both of her legs like a pretzel. So like this, and then both of her legs. So that shortened the umbilical cord. Obviously, she couldn't go down. And then every time that I would have a contraction, the umbilical cord would tighten, and it would kind of like, it would tighten around her, and it would cause her to not get enough oxygen. So that obviously broke my heart. And to think of all the like the pumping that I was doing and the walking to try to make myself get contractions made me feel even worse, just wondering like how long was that happening without me knowing. And then also it also made me grateful that I didn't do the castor oil, because if I had done that, apparently the contractions are much more forceful, much stronger, and I don't think she would have made it for that if I had done that. And also, I'm happy I didn't do the membrane sleep because of the same thing. Like, it's more forceful, the contractions, and I don't think she would have made it. The doctor had asked me when she came to check on me if when they took the baby out, I don't remember which doctor this was, by the way. I don't know if it was the pediatrician or if it was the doctor who I had seen when the heart was decelerating and she just wasn't in the room for the surgery. But anyways, one of the doctors had asked me, like, when they pulled her out, did you hear her cry? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then they told me that sometimes it happens where they pull out the baby in situations like this, and there is no crying because it's too late. So again, that like hit me hard. It felt like a knife straight to my heart. And just thinking of her like in distress was really hard for me to just manage that feeling. So yeah, that was kind of like all the physical stuff. And then I think by the time I hit 3 weeks, I felt much better. Even 2.5 weeks, I felt much better. I could sit again. I could get on the floor. I could put my own socks on. I started getting dressed every day. The showering got less scary. By now, the thing is that most of my stomach, like below my belly button to the incision, is numb. It kind of feels like a tingling feeling going down to my belly button until the numbness starts. But I'm wondering if the numbness is wearing off because I'm feeling more sore the last few days. So I'm not sure why, but that's just another part of it, I guess. In terms of emotions, like the baby blues was really, really hard. I think because of my 2 last miscarriages, and also now the thought of possibly have lost her at birth, I feel like my maternal separation anxiety was like through the roof. Having visitors, I just had a really hard time. Anyone wanting to hold her, I had a really hard time. Really like terrified of germs and terrified of like her getting sick and terrified of just like everything. Just scared that something would happen to her again. I felt like she had gone through the trauma with me, and like it was probably way harder on her because she's a baby and like this is how she's being introduced into the world. And then we even did the PCU test, and we did that in the middle of the night when we weren't sure if we actually wanted to do it. In the end, we regretted doing it because she just like bawled her eyes out. She was screaming, crying, and she was a really quiet baby the first like 2 weeks. So hearing her like that was really heartbreaking, and I really regretted the PCU test. So overall, I just felt like she had been traumatized by all of this. So I couldn't bear the fact or the idea that something else could happen to her so soon. And so the thought of like SIDS, the thought of her getting sick and any of that, it was just too much for me to bear. So I really kept the visitors at bay. I didn't want anyone holding her. And I think that people didn't really understand that. I think that there was a lot of resistance to that. In the end, I don't regret that choice. If anything, I might regret having let some people come by who I knew weren't going to respect my boundaries or like respect what I went through or like show any support. So yeah, the first 2 weeks were brutal with the baby blues and just like the maternal separation anxiety. Jeremy would tell me like, you should just go for a walk, get some sun, like it'll do you good. And I would just walk like less than 5 minutes and I would just cry because she felt so far away and I missed her. And every time I put her to sleep at night, I would cry. So it was just difficult, like overall a difficult experience. And I would say the hardest part now about all of this as well is that I have to think about my future pregnancies and my future births, because if I want many kids, like repeating a C-section every time isn't recommended. And I did want 5 kids. I still want like 4 or 5 kids. So if I still want that many kids, it's more ideal to do a VBAC, so vaginal birth after a C-section. But with that, there is the risk of uterine rupture. It's only a 1% risk. And overall, the rest of my chances are pretty good. Like I think I have a 75% chance of having a successful VBAC, a 24% chance of it being a repeat C-section, or technically 25% of it being a repeat C-section. But the biggest thing that scares me is that there's a 1% chance of uterine rupture, which is where your uterus tears open at the incision site, and then the baby ends up in your like abdominal cavity. And is that the right word? I don't know. But in your abdominal, your abs basically, and it's life-threatening for you and for baby. If that happens, I think there's like a 1% chance of maternal mortality, and I think it's like 3 to 5% chance of the baby dying as well. So it plays on my mind a lot. I'm a very cautious, very anxious person when it comes to health, and I'm not sure if it's fair to Rosie, for one, for me to take that risk if something did happen. Also, if I'm just willing to take that risk, or if I should just stop, or if I should just have 2 kids and have a repeat C-section, although that also terrifies me. I don't know. It's a lot of decisions. I have to wait 2 years to have another baby, just so that the scar can heal very well and put up my chances of being able to have a successful VBAC. I also have to know how the uterus was cut, if it was vertical or if it was horizontal. There's a lot of things to know based on the report, but that's been playing on my mind basically every night. It's something that I'm researching like all the time. So if ever you've been through something similar and you want to leave your experience in the comments or reach out to me privately, please feel free to do that. Also, if you guys know of any doulas that specialize in VBACs, please leave like their Instagram handle or their information in the comments as well. I would really, really appreciate that. Yeah, just finding support, I think that's a big part of it. I think I'm definitely going to go do therapy with somebody who specializes in this as well. I'm going to call the CLSC to figure that out, just so that I could process everything and have more information on like what would work best for me. It's basically like what's on my mind these days. And besides that, I'm doing really well, I would say. I'm a bit sore at the incision site, but breastfeeding well. Baby is a really, I would say, easy baby. She sleeps through the night really well. She wakes up maybe like every 2 to 4 hours to feed, but then she goes right back to sleep. She doesn't cry too much. She's the sweetest thing in the whole world, and honestly, like, my heart feels so full having her. It feels like for the first time in my life, I'm finally doing what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I feel so fulfilled. I feel like my life has so much meaning. So I wouldn't change what happened at all, and I'm happy that she got out safe. I'm happy I'm safe. It'll just be a bit of time for me to work through everything, both physically and mentally, to just recover. But the actual part of having a baby, I feel like we're already in our groove, in our routine. I feel like everything's amazing. It's exactly how I thought it was going to be. It's wonderful, and I literally have nothing negative to say about the transition to motherhood. So yeah, that's my birth story. It wasn't the natural labor I had planned, and of course I'm also grieving that because I see other people having that experience, or even just delivering vaginally, even if it wasn't like a natural labor, and I do envy it. So I am grieving the fact that I didn't get that experience. I still feel like I'm waiting for it to happen any day now, and then I realize that I'm not pregnant anymore, and it's going to be years before I can possibly have that experience if I feel brave enough for it. But yeah, so that's just all of the different facets of kind of what I've been going through the last month. And yeah, I'm excited to just enjoy these next couple of years with our baby and to get back into like the things that I love, like creating YouTube videos and videography and making shorts and reels and all that stuff, to feel inspired to create again. That feels really good. But I can hear her waking up right now. Jeremy has her, and I can hear her crying a little bit. She's probably hungry. So I'm going to go now. Thank you guys so much for being here, for hearing my story, for leaving any supporting comments, like I said, about your story or doulas or just resources. books. I would really like to read some books probably about that. And yeah, I will see you next week with another video. Thank you guys so much. Bye everyone.